The blood-stained leather whip cracked through the dusty air of Sweetwater, Texas, in 1873, as Madeline Monroe writhed in pain against the wooden post where she'd been bound by the sheriff's men, her torn dress exposing her back to the ruthless lashes that painted crimson lines across her pale skin. 10 more. Sheriff Barton hollered, his voice carrying across the town square where nearly every resident had gathered to witness the punishment of the woman they'd branded a thief. Let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks they can steal from honest folk. Madeline bit her lip until it bled, refusing to give them the satisfaction of her screams. The accusation of stealing food from the general store was false. She'd paid for that bread with the last of her coins, but her word meant nothing against the store owners, especially not since she was new to town with no friends or family to vouch for her character. "Stop this." A commanding voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd. The throng of onlookers parted as a tall figure strode forward, dust swirling around his worn leather boots. Wade Calloway had been watching from outside the saloon, his weathered hat pulled low over his eyes, a whiskey barely touched on the table before him. Though he'd only arrived in Sweetwater 3 days prior, he'd seen enough injustice in his 30 years to recognize it instantly. "This ain't justice," Wade declared, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who'd faced death and didn't fear it. "I've seen thieves punished before, but never without a proper trial." Sheriff Barton scoffed. "This ain't your concern, stranger. Move along before you join her." Wade's blue eyes hardened as he stepped forward, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair that caught the afternoon sunlight. "I'm making it my concern. Release her." The deputy holding the whip hesitated, looking to the sheriff for guidance. The crowd had gone silent, the only sound the labored breathing of Madeline as she hung from her bonds. "Last warning," Barton growled, hand moving to his holster. Wade didn't flinch. Instead, he walked deliberately toward the post where Madeline was tied. "If someone's to be punished today, let it be me. I'll take her lashes." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The sheriff's face reddened with anger and embarrassment. "You volunteering to be whipped for a thief you don't even know?" "I'm volunteering to prevent an injustice," Wade replied evenly. "And if that means taking her punishment, so be it." For a long moment, no one moved. Then the sheriff laughed a harsh, ugly sound.
"Fine."
"Untie her. Let the fool have what he's asking for." As the deputy moved to release Madeline, Wade removed his leather vest and cotton shirt, revealing a torso already marked with old scars from battles fought and survived. He handed his belongings to a wide-eyed boy at the edge of the crowd. "Watch these for me, son," he said softly. Madeline collapsed as they cut her free, her legs too weak to hold her. Wade caught her before she hit the dirt, and for the first time, their eyes met hers, a deep amber that reminded him of whiskey and lamplight. "Why?" she whispered, barely audible. "Because it's not right," he answered simply, helping her to her feet. As Wade was secured to the post, arms stretched above him, the sheriff addressed the crowd. 20 lashes for the hero," he announced with malicious glee. "Let's see if he's still standing tall afterward." The first lash tore across Wade's back, but he didn't make a sound. Madeline watched in horror from where she'd been pushed to the edge of the crowd, clutching the remains of her dress around her shoulders. By the 10th lash, Wade's back was a map of red welts, but still he made no sound. By the 15th, blood flowed freely, but his head remained up, his jaw clenched in silent defiance. When the 20th lash fell, a hush had descended over the crowd. Not once had Wade cried out. Not once had he begged for mercy. The display of stoic courage had transformed the mood of the onlookers from bloodthirsty curiosity to uncomfortable shame. "Cut him down," the sheriff ordered, suddenly eager to end the spectacle that had shifted from public justice to public brutality before their eyes. As Wade was released, Madeline pushed forward through the dispersing crowd. "Let me help you," she said, her voice stronger than it had been before. Wade straightened despite the pain, his eyes finding hers. "I'll be fine, madam. My name is Madeline," she said, "and I owe you a debt I can never repay." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Wade Calloway. And no debt is owed when a man does what's right. An older woman stepped forward from the crowd. "Bring him to my boarding house," she told Madeline. "I've got supplies to tend those wounds." As they helped Wade down the dusty street, whispers followed them. The story of the stranger who took another's punishment was already spreading through Sweetwater like wildfire. At Mrs. Parker's boarding house, Madeline carefully cleaned Wade's wounds with water and whiskey, while the older woman prepared a poultice of herbs. "Why did you do it?" Madeline asked again as she worked, her fingers gentle against his ravaged skin. "You don't know me. I could be exactly what they said, a thief." Wade winced as the alcohol touched a particularly deep cut. "Are you?" "No," she answered firmly. "I paid for that bread. The storekeeper, Mr. Hollins, he—" She paused, hands trembling slightly. "He made advances. When I refused him, he claimed I stole from him." Wade nodded, unsurprised. "Men like that exist everywhere. I've met too many of them." "You still haven't answered my question," Madeline persisted. "Why risk yourself for a stranger?" Wade was silent for a moment, his eyes distant with memories. "5 years ago, I watched a man get hanged for a crime he didn't commit. I said nothing, did nothing. I've carried that with me ever since." Madeline's hands stilled on his back. "So, this was about your guilt?" "Maybe at first," he admitted. "But when I saw you there, refusing to break despite everything." He turned to look at her, his blue eyes piercing. "Sometimes courage is contagious, Miss Monroe." For the first time since the ordeal began, Madeline smiled, a small, tentative thing, but real. "You can stay here tonight," Mrs. Parker told Wade. "First night's free for anyone who stands up to that tyrant Barton." Later that evening, as Madeline brought Wade a bowl of stew, she found him sitting gingerly on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the stars above Sweetwater. "Mrs. Parker says you're a cattle driver," she said, setting the food beside him. Wade nodded.
"Was.
I'm between herds at the moment." He didn't elaborate on why he'd left his last outfit or what had brought him to this particular town. "And you?" he asked, turning the conversation away from himself. "What brought you to Sweetwater?" Madeline sat in the chair across from him, smoothing the borrowed dress Mrs. Parker had given her. "I was a governess in Boston. The family moved west for the father's business. When we reached Dallas, they decided they no longer required my services." "They abandoned you in Texas?" Wade's voice held quiet anger. "They gave me 2 months' wages," she said with a shrug that didn't quite disguise her hurt. "But finding respectable work for a woman alone isn't easy. I've been moving from town to town, looking for something permanent." Wade's eyes softened. "And finding trouble instead." "Trouble finds me," she corrected with a wry smile. "I don't go looking for it." They talked into the night, two strangers finding unexpected common ground. Both had lost their parents young. Both had made their way in the world largely alone. By the time Madeline retired to her own room, something had shifted between them, a fragile connection neither had expected to find. The next morning, Wade rose early despite his injuries, determined to set things right. He walked stiffly to the sheriff's office, ignoring the stares of early risers who recognized him from the previous day's events. Sheriff Barton looked up in surprise when Wade entered. "Got a death wish, Calloway?" "Got a proposition," Wade countered. "Miss Monroe isn't a thief." Hollins lied because she rejected his advances. The sheriff leaned back in his chair. "That's a serious accusation against a respected businessman. Talk to Mrs. Parker. She's had 3 girls leave her boarding house in the past year because of Hollins' unwanted attention." Barton's eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" "A public apology to Miss Monroe and your word that she'll be treated fairly in this town." The sheriff laughed. "Or what?" Wade leaned forward, his voice low and steady. Or I send telegrams to every newspaper between here and Austin about how Sheriff Barton ordered 20 lashes for a woman accused of stealing a loaf of bread without trial or evidence. You wouldn't. I spent 4 years fighting in the war, Sheriff. I've seen real justice and real injustice. Test me if you want. Something in Wade's eyes, perhaps the absolute certainty in them, made Barton reconsider.
Fine.
I'll speak to Hollins. If there's been a misunderstanding, we'll make it right. Wade nodded and turned to leave. Calloway, the sheriff, called after him. You planning to stay in Sweetwater? Wade paused at the door. Haven't decided yet. By noon, Madeline had received a stilted apology from both the sheriff and Mr. Hollins, along with an offer of employment from Mrs. Parker, who needed help running the boarding house. I can't believe you did that, Madeline told Wade as they sat on Mrs. Parker's porch that afternoon. Confronting the sheriff again. Wade shrugged, then winced as the movement pulled at his healing wounds. Seemed like the right thing to do. Is that your answer for everything? She smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression that made her amber eyes light up. It was the right thing to do? Not everything, he admitted, but enough things. Over the next week, as Wade recovered from his injuries, he found reasons to extend his stay in Sweetwater. He helped repair Mrs. Parker's leaking roof. He assisted the blacksmith with a difficult horse. He stepped in when the stagecoach guard fell ill, riding shotgun to the next town and back. And each evening, he found himself on the porch with Madeline, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple. What will you do when you're fully healed? She asked him on the 8th night, her voice carefully neutral. Wade considered the question. I've been offered a job at the Thompson Ranch. Breaking horses. Her eyes widened. You're staying in Sweetwater? Thought I might, he said, watching her reaction closely. If there's reason enough to stay. The blush that colored her cheeks told him everything he needed to know. As spring turned to summer, Wade established himself as a respected horse trainer at the Thompson Ranch. His fair dealings and quiet competence earned him the trust of both his employer and the other ranch hands. Meanwhile, Madeline thrived helping Mrs. Parker, whose boarding house had never been so efficiently run or so popular. They courted properly, with Wade calling on Madeline every Sunday after church, taking her for walks through town or picnics by the creek. Their shared experience had created a bond that deepened with each passing week. I never thought I'd find peace in a place where I once knew such pain, Madeline confessed one evening as they walked along the creek bank, the setting sun casting long shadows across the grass. Wade took her hand, his touch gentle. Sometimes the darkest moments lead us to the brightest futures. She stopped, turning to face him. Is that what you believe? That everything happens for a reason? I believe we make meaning from what happens to us, he replied. Good or bad, it's what we do after that matters. Madeline studied his face, the strong jaw now clean-shaven for their outings, the blue eyes that had first looked at her with compassion when everyone else showed judgment. Why did you really stay in Sweetwater, Wade? He held her gaze steadily. You know why. The kiss that followed was their first tentative at first, then deepening with months of unspoken feelings. When they finally parted, breathless, Wade's hands framed her face with reverence. I stayed for you, Madeline. I'll always stay for you. By autumn, their courtship had become the talk of Sweetwater. Mrs. Parker gave Madeline knowing smiles whenever Wade came to call, and Mr. Thompson ribbed his horse trainer good-naturedly about when he was going to make an honest woman of that pretty Miss Monroe. Wade saved his earnings diligently, determined to have something to offer Madeline beyond his heart. In November, he purchased a small parcel of land outside town with a modest cabin that needed work but had good bones and a view of the distant mountains. On a crisp December evening, with the first dusting of winter frost on the ground, Wade invited Madeline to see the property. As they approached on horseback, the setting sun gilded the cabin in golden light. "It needs work," he said nervously as they dismounted. "The roof is sound, but the porch needs rebuilding, and inside it's perfect," Madeline interrupted, her eyes shining as she took in the small homestead. "Whose is it?" Wade took a deep breath.
Mine.
"Ours, if you want it to be." Madeline turned to him, understanding dawning in her eyes. Wade dropped to one knee in the frost-covered grass, taking her gloved hand in his. "Madeline Monroe, from the moment I saw you, something in me knew I would never be the same. You've shown me what true strength looks like. You've given me a reason to build something lasting." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Madeline's eyes. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, she laughed through her tears. "To think, if I hadn't been falsely accused of stealing bread, if I hadn't been in that saloon at that exact moment," he continued. "We might never have found each other," she finished, pressing her forehead to his. They were married on New Year's Day, 1874, in Sweetwater's small church. Mrs. Parker stood as Madeline's witness, beaming like a proud mother. Mr. Thompson stood for Wade, having become something of a mentor to the younger man. Even Sheriff Barton attended, awkwardly offering congratulations and a wedding gift, a handcrafted rocking chair for their new home. It was his way of making amends, though he never directly apologized for his actions that fateful day. The couple moved into their cabin, spending evenings and weekends slowly transforming it into a home. Wade built furniture with his own hands while Madeline planted a garden and hung curtains she'd sewn herself. They worked side by side, the shared labor deepening their bond. By spring, Madeline had news that brought Wade to his knees with joy. They were expecting a child. "A baby," he whispered in awe, his hand gently touching her still, flat stomach. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though his radiant expression already answered her question. "Happier than I ever thought possible," he assured her, gathering her into his arms. "You've given me everything I never knew I wanted," Madeline Calloway. As Madeline's pregnancy progressed, their small homestead flourished. Wade's reputation as a horse trainer grew, bringing offers from ranchers beyond Sweetwater. He took on special jobs that paid well but kept close to home, unwilling to be far from Madeline as her time approached. In early October, their daughter arrived after a difficult labor that left Wade pacing outside their bedroom while the doctor and Mrs. Parker attended Madeline. When he was finally allowed in, the sight of his exhausted wife holding their tiny daughter reduced the strong cowboy to tears. "She's perfect," he whispered, carefully taking the bundle Madeline offered. "What shall we call her?" "Hope," Madeline said without hesitation. "Because that's what you gave me when you stepped forward that day." Wade nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat as he gazed at his daughter's tiny features. Little Hope Calloway brought new joy to their lives, her presence cementing the family they had created from the most unlikely beginning. Wade proved to be a doting father, often carrying Hope in a sling across his chest as he worked around their property, telling her stories about horses and stars and brave mothers. As Hope grew from infant to toddler, Sweetwater changed around them. The railroad came through, bringing new prosperity and new faces. Wade's business expanded from horse training to breeding, with a small but respected operation that allowed them to build an addition onto their cabin. When Hope was 3, Madeline gave birth to their son, whom they named Samuel after Wade's father. Their family of 4 settled into a rhythm of work and love that sustained them through good seasons and difficult ones. One summer evening, when the children were playing in the yard as the sun set, Wade found Madeline standing on their porch, watching their daughter teach her younger brother how to catch fireflies. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. She leaned back against his chest with a contented sigh. "I was just thinking about how far we've come, how one terrible day led to all of this." Wade rested his chin on her shoulder, his eyes on their children. "I used to wonder why things happened the way they did. All the loss, all the wandering. And now," she asked, turning in his arms to face him. "Now I know it was all leading me to you," he said simply. "Every step, every decision, they were all part of the path that brought us together." Madeline touched his face, tracing the lines that years of sun and laughter had etched around his eyes. "Do you ever regret it? Taking those lashes for a stranger?" Wade smiled, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "Not for a single moment. Best decision I ever made." As twilight deepened into night, they called the children inside, lighting lamps against the darkness. After bedtime stories and prayers, with Hope and Samuel tucked safely in their beds, Wade and Madeline sat together on the porch swing he'd built when she was pregnant with Hope. 10 years, Madeline mused, her head resting on his shoulder as they swayed gently. "It's been 10 years since that day in the town square." Wade nodded, his arm tightening around her. "Best decade of my life." "Even with all the challenges? The drought 2 summers ago? Samuel's fever last winter?" "Even then," he confirmed, "because we faced it all together." The moon rose over their little homestead, casting silver light across the land they'd nurtured together. From those first painful lashes to this peaceful moment, they had built something neither had dared to dream of before fate brought them together on a dusty street in Sweetwater. "I love you, Wade Calloway," Madeline whispered, the words as true now as the first time she'd spoken them. "And I love you, Madeline Calloway," he replied, bending to kiss her softly. "Yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows." As the stars wheeled overhead, they remained on the porch, 2 souls bound by an act of courage and the love that had grown from it. Their story, which began with pain and injustice, had transformed into one of healing and hope, proving that even in the harshest landscapes of the American West, love could take root and flourish against all odds. In the years that followed, Sweetwater would grow and change. The frontier would gradually tame. But the legend of the stranger who took a punishment meant for another would be passed down through generations, a testament to the fact that one person's courage can change not just a moment, but an entire life. And in their home outside town, Wade and Madeline Calloway would continue to build their legacy, not just in the ranch that would one day stretch across acres or the children who would carry their name forward, but in the daily acts of love and kindness that had become the foundation of their life together. For theirs was a love born in the crucible of sacrifice, tempered by hardship and strengthened by shared dreams as enduring as the western landscape that had brought them together and as boundless as the Texas sky above them.